This evening, we learned Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer will finally meet with Chinese officials later this week. It is the first confirmed meeting between the two countries since the president's tariffs went into effect. It has been more than a month since Liberation Day, and investors, they have made it clear that they are very nervous about the lack of deals so far, and it does not help that the bold messaging from the administration last month have turned into new calls for patience.
Every country's called us. That's the beauty of what we do. We put ourselves in the driver's seat. We're doing very well in making, I call them tailored deals, not off the rack. These are tailored, highly tailored deals. I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal.
It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate.
We don't want a deal that's going to be a bad deal, or I could make every deal in one day if I wanted to.
Let me just say 90 deals in 90 days.
President Trump has brought hundreds of countries now from around the world to the negotiating table. This is the art of the deal.
President Trump creates what I would call strategic uncertainty in the negotiations.
Now, we've only got 90 days and we only got 60 left. So these things are coming. But you got to be patient.
Everyone says, when are you going to sign deals? We don't have to sign deals. They have to sign deals with us.
Historically, it has taken 18 months on average for the United States to negotiate any trade deal. And remember, most countries are facing basically one trade war, as opposed to the United States, which is now tangled up in 200. Those other countries can seek alternative trading partners. We cannot. Despite what Secretary Bessent and others say that America First is not America alone, well, America alone is exactly where we find ourselves. Why? Because the president put us here. Joining me now, Barry Ritholtz, dear friend of mine, co-founder, chairman, and chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management, and host of the Masters in Business Must Listen To podcast on Bloomberg Radio, and Max Chapkin, Bloomberg Business Week journalist and co-host of the Elon Inc. podcast. Barry, does this administration get yet that China is not going to be publicly played or publicly humiliated? Xi Jinping is not up for that.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see that this completely unthought out, sort of off the cuff tariff deal hasn't resulted in China bending to American will. Will, who could have predicted that?
Everyone. Anyone who has ever studied economics, global economics, or China could have told you that.
So you have to wonder what the end game is here, because it just has seemed to be so haphazard and random and just simply not strategically thought out. I don't know what they thought was going to be the outcome of this unforced error of just declaring a war on our closest trading partners and allies. It kind of beggars the imagination.
Well, let's go back to this point I was just trying to make. All these other countries, they've got one trade deal to negotiate, them versus the United States. We have 200. How does that not put us in a complicated, weak position?
Well, you think about this conversation about strategic uncertainty or whatever, and I could
Can we just
sort
be
of
clear? Do you know how insulting it is to say this is strategic uncertainty when we've got businesses, big and small, holding on for dear life?
I was just going to say, businesses, strategic uncertainty is terrible. It's a disaster because there's no ability to plan. I mean, there is a version of this this trade war, these tariffs, that you could sort of squint and imagine it working if it's very deliberate, if you're giving people lots of time to whatever, make adjustments, invest, and so on. But none of that is happening. It's just seat of the pants, ad hoc. And as you said, you know, the best case is some kind of frantic deal making that's going to leave businesses with whiplash or worse.
I want to share more of what Secretary Scott Bessent said in his hearing today.
Who pays tariffs, Mr. Secretary? No. Answer the questions I asked, please. I only have 5 minutes. Who pays tariffs?
Sorry? Well,
who pays tariffs?
Sorry,
Mr. Secretary, please.
Excuse me.
The question is very simply, who pays tariffs, Mr. Chairman? I'd like him to answer that question.
Well,
he wants to answer other questions.
Well, Congressman, if the exporters, they dislike tariffs so much, why wouldn't they? If I think what you're trying to get me to say.
Did you remember the question? I'm not sure you did. Who pays tariffs?
That It's a very complicated question.
So I'll ask one more time, who pays tariffs?
Sir, the history would show that it is a complicated mix of who pays the tariffs over various times.
Who runs Bartertown? With an answer like that, he deserves to be in the Thunderdome. I mean, was that like the dog ate my homework? That is absolutely humiliating that our Treasury Secretary cannot answer a question that is Economics 101.
Well,
or will not.
I was going to say, he can answer the question, but it'll make his boss angry. Look, there's only two possible parties who are going to pay the tariffs. Either the consumers, for whom it's a giant European VAT-like tax, right? Tariffs are America's version of the VAT tax.
Which is why Trump didn't want Bezos to show it on his website.
Of course not.
Or businesses, which, if it's not businesses, why are they begging for exemptions, Biggie?
Or the alternative is the manufacturers and exporters to the United States will suffer a decrease in margin, but history, to quote the Treasury Secretary, shows that's not what happens. Consumers pay tariffs. And even worse, what's supposed to give American manufacturing a leg up, what happens is the domestic producers say, oh, these guys can get more money? Let's raise our prices. So tariffs not only cost consumer more money for imports, but it's inflationary for domestically produced goods and services.
So Donald Trump is what he promised to be, the most powerful man in the world, because this single man has managed to hurt GDP in basically the entire world. I want to change subjects.
You haven't seen it come into GDP yet because January, February, March, the GDP data that was released last month did not
account for this.
Account for April 2nd, Liberation Day. That's not going to show up till we get the Q2 data in July, which appears to be going to be a stinker.
That's a nice way to put it. I want to shift subject slightly because the IRS has now lost 31% of its auditors because of the Doge downsizing. You know all about Doge. And to be clear, this could end up costing our government billions of dollars. Auditors pay for themselves, okay? Research shows the IRS collects $6 for every $1 spent on audits of high-income taxpayers. I get it. Nobody's a fan of the IRS. Nobody likes to do their taxes. But if we don't have people working at the IRS collecting taxes, we're only going to be deeper in the hole.
I mean, this is a case where I think it's just entirely about partisanship. But that said, you know, we're verging towards Doge costing significantly more. The savings have gone, you know, from $2 trillion to $1 trillion to $150 billion. Now we're seeing reports that they're going to have to spend $130 billion to rehire employees. And then when you layer on these losses in tax revenue, it could add up a lot. I saw estimates anywhere from, you know, tens of billions to $1 trillion over 10 years. So we're talking about huge sums of money that the U.S. is going to have to find a way to make up elsewhere.
Then if Scott Bessent's number one focus was debt and deficit, and if what he really wants to do are tax cuts in this new budget bill, how are you going to get all that to happen when this whole deficit they were going to take on is only going to get bigger?
They don't care about deficits. They don't care about debt. That's a giant act. Trump's biggest accomplishment in his first term was
crypto.
No, the first term was the Tax Cuts and Job Acts. He delivered, at least on that, he delivered exactly what he promised. We're going to create giant tax cuts. Yeah, maybe they were a little inflationary, maybe they were a little stimulative, but many of his colleagues and friends love them, and he wants a repeat of that. So all these distractions, and you talked about this last night on the show, all this nonsense about becoming Pope and Canada's the 51st state and the third term, and these are all distractions. The real thing that's happening is in a lot of courts, just like in 2020, he's losing a lot of these cases. That's where that $130 billion of you're not authorized to do this, you have to pay these people. What's really going on is a distraction of these key things. The IRS is just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, guess what? We're not going to be distracted. And that is not bias. We're going to cover the administration every night of the week with facts.